Urban Archaeology, Lost Buildings of St. Louis. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, there's a new exhibition opening at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation in St. Louis in September. And here to talk about it, please welcome our guest today. That is Stephanie Weissberg. She is a curator at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation. And Michael Allen is the executive director of the National Building Arts Center in Sauget, Illinois. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Have you two ever worked together before?
No, this is our first time working together. Yeah.
Before we get more into detail about the specific exhibition, let's just have a little general overview of it. And first of all, urban archaeology. That doesn't make sense to me, so explain it.
Well, it's actually a term that Larry Giles, the founder of National Building Arts Center, coined sometime in the early 1980s. He was a self-trained architectural salvager, became probably the most prolific person to recover parts of buildings, from decorated facade elements to structural and mechanical systems, in some cases entire building elevations. And so to him it was an act of reclaiming the built environment, treating the city as it was being demolished in his own time, as if it were ancient sort of field site.
So is it not just a collection of pretty pieces of old buildings? Is it more than that?
It's a lot more. I mean, it's really a collection of knowledge systems. So, like an archaeologist collects pottery shards, tools, anything to, sort of underscore social systems and structures. So with this collection, it's not just things that are pretty, although there's a lot of pretty things to look at. But it really explains, how buildings work, how they come to be, and also, sadly, why they disappear sometimes.
Stephanie, was this something new for you? You deal a lot with art, but I wouldn't imagine stuff like this.
Yeah, I do typically work with art and living artists, though the Pulitzer shows art from many different time periods. We are a non-collecting museum, but which is a very flexible model to have. So we do not have limitations in the period that we show. We also are a museum that's founded within an architecturally significant building designed by the Pritzker Prize-winning architect Tadao Ando. Mm-hmm. So I'm certainly used to thinking about architecture in relationship to the work that I do. The Pulitzer also has a campus that has a number of significant architectural sites, but this is the first exhibition that I've worked on that takes architecture of St. Louis as its subject. There have been other exhibitions at the Pulitzer, though, that have looked at the same subject.
Where did the idea for this come from?
Stephanie?
Well, I think building on this history that the Pulitzer has engaged in looking at architecture, both in a very broad way and also in relationship to the city of St. Louis. There was an exhibition that the Pulitzer organized in 2015 that looked at a single house on Enright Avenue, which is just north of the Pulitzer, and looked at its history. There are a number of other examples in the institution's past years that look at architecture, and as a museum that's cited within a very rich architectural context, it is one of those threads that we continue to return to over time. We were aware of the really important work that the National Building Arts Center has been doing for decades in this area, and as a very important resource, and one, if not the largest collection in the nation of this material. So it seemed like an obvious avenue to connect with such an important local resource to tell stories about architecture in St. Louis.
Is this exhibition as unusual as I think it is?
Well, it's very unusual for us. Parts of the collection have been exhibited, as far as the Art Institute of Chicago or the Art Museum. But we're talking about a single set of panels, one piece from one building. We've never done a sort of categorical look at our entire collection, cross-section. This will be the largest exhibition of the National Building Arts Center collection yet mounted. And kind of, in some ways, a calling card, because Stephanie contacted me right after our founder died in 2021, and I became the director. And we were looking for a way to become visible and to show that this project would continue, after this wonderful heroic effort of one person who kind of made this his life, that this institution was not going to sort of disappear, and that public access and interpretation would be on the agenda, not just storing things in warehouses.
Stephanie, so was the National Building Arts Center on your radar then?
It was, yes. I think many people at the Pulitzer have admired the work that the National Building Arts Center has done in the city, and Michael actually taught a course in relationship to the exhibition that I mentioned earlier about the house on Enright, and I was aware that he had resumed the role as director at the National Building Arts Center. We've also known of a few artists here and there over the years who have done interventions with materials from the National Building Arts Center's collection.
Okay. Well, before we talk specifically about this exhibition, which opens in September, let me just find out about both of you two. Michael, the National Building Arts Center in Sauget is something, it was on my radar, I'd read about it, never been there, didn't know much about it. So could you just explain it to someone that's not familiar with it?
Yes. So the National Building Arts Center really is unique in the entire country. It lives up to its name. Well, that's serendipity. We were able to acquire a steel foundry, earliest part from 1921. So we took this collection, which is all about making and labor and these deeper sort of histories, and we're storing it and interpreting it in a site of labor and industry with this incredible view of the downtown skyline.
Really?
So yeah, and we're an institution that gets beyond surfaces. So we study the built environment, and we love architecture and design. But behind architecture and design are narratives of power, place, class, race, economics. So we like to get behind the facade. So our view of the arch actually across the industrial landscape of the east side, at the tail end is the beautiful and here, sort of powerful architecture of downtown and Sarandon's Arch. But in the foreground is all the systems that you don't really often look at that also make a city a powerful, geographic force.
And like all the things they tore down before they put up the arch.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about the Pulitzer. Well, when you talk about architecture, that building stands out certainly. And it's in Midtown, which has become just a fantastic arts district. So tell me a little bit about the Pulitzer, because you have all kinds of areas and everything.
Yeah, so the Pulitzer Arts Foundation was founded in 2001 by Emily Rao Pulitzer. We're an arts museum, and we, as you mentioned, are housed inside of a building that was designed by the Japanese architect Tadao Ando. It's his first public building in the United States, so very architecturally significant space. A very beautiful space to work within, and one that often drives us to make site-specific responsive exhibitions. The Pulitzer is also sited on a campus that includes a rain garden and park that we call park-like, and a historic building called the Spring Church, which the Pulitzer has recently acquired and
For years,
restored.
that was just sort of like a frame without a roof that anybody that was familiar with the area would remember, but you've really turned it into a destination.
Yeah, the Pulitzer has just recently finished stabilizing the structure, and for now it's a community gathering space. We've hosted performances there, and we hope its use will continue to grow and feed back into the community in the future. And I will say that maybe later in our conversation we can talk a little bit more about Grand Center and its role as an art district, both historically and in the present day, which is one of the themes that we address in the exhibition.
Excellent. Why don't we take a look at it? We have a picture here, and I think it's from Sauget. Michael, so you can tell us.
Right. This is the main building, library and office building, former office building at the steel foundry. So this is basically the front door to the National Building Arts Center.
So how do you get there? You go across the bridge? Is it on main drag over there?
Not on Route 3. We are on Falling Springs Road, which is one road over. So it's not hard to find in the era of GPS.
Let's go to the next picture.
And here's the sense, we have this 40,000 square foot casting shed that's in the
So it doesn't look like the Pulitzer.
No, it doesn't look like we're really in the antithesis. Although we have, you can see in this image, we do have our own concrete walls, but they're more rugged and utilitarian. But here's a little bit of our vast holdings. We probably have somewhere between 300 to 500,000 architectural artifacts.
Do you have galleries like the museum, or is it kind of rough looking like I'm seeing?
It's in a state of becoming. We don't have a gallery yet. We are hoping to get one off the ground. Most of what can be seen in our collection is either outdoors or in one of our warehouse buildings, but not with the signage and interpretive sort of messaging we're going to have at Urban Archaeology, which is another reason.
Let's look at one more. I think this might be some of the beautiful stuff.
And this is what you can see at in one of our warehouses. We have display easels set up, so not everything is hidden in crates or behind packaging. And we have tours second Saturday of every month, so we welcome visitors.
Give me your professional's overview of his facility and what they do.
Oh, I mean, it's an incredible resource. I think I had been familiar with National Building Arts Center's holdings for a number of years, and I had seen the materials out of context from the center in various locations across the city, but I had not been to the National Building Arts Center site myself until we started this collaboration, and it really is breathtaking, the degree of the collection that's been amassed, the depth of knowledge that's there, including the object holdings and also the library. So it's in many ways, I think, a gem of the city that hopefully will continue to get more use and garner more excitement around the city as people become more aware of it.
So everything in this exhibition is from there.
Yes, that's correct. There with a handful of
some documents and other items to kind of tell the stories of what we have. But
all right. Well, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we'll talk specifically about this exhibition that opens in September. So stay with us on the City Corner.
There's so many reasons to love St. Louis, you can't pick just one. From the arts, architecture, and culture. An all-new development, including the Cortex Community Center. And you're never too far from great music and entertainment.
So come and experience St. Louis.
There's so many reasons to love St. Louis, you can't pick just one.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods and 108 beautiful city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and the gorgeous Tower Grove Park right here.
And there's always something new to experience, no matter the time of day or the season. So come and experience St. Louis.
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. We're talking about a new exhibition that opens September the 8th at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation. And with us from the Pulitzer is Stephanie Weissberg, and Michael Allen is here too from the National Building Arts Center in Sauget, Illinois, and it's from there that everything in the exhibition came from. So let's talk about it.
I think the exhibition is really exciting because it brings together materials from a range of different neighborhoods and case studies.
And how do we know how to process what we're seeing in our minds? Do you guide us somehow in that way?
Yeah. Yes, there are interpretive materials that, written materials in association with the exhibition that help people to understand and contextualize the objects that they'll be encountering, as well as, Michael, do you want to share a little bit about the documents and paperwork and photographs that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have large pieces, and one of the most exciting parts of this is people will be able to look up close, eye level, at a lot of artifacts that would have been, tens to hundreds of feet above them.
Right. Let's do that now.
Yeah, sure.
We have a lot of images, or several images from the show, from the exhibition. Let's take a look at the first one, and you can explain it.
Right. So, yeah, one of
That
the,
needs an explanation.
right. Yeah, it's a very enigmatic image without explanation. But, one of our tracks is all the different sets of hands that make the built environment, looking beyond the architects and the engineers, even beyond the financiers and power brokers, at the sort of handcraft of the factories. And so this is a tile yard where they're making everything from what he's standing on are segments of chimney tile. There's also sewer tile and roof tile. St. Louis was one of the preeminent clay industry or ceramic industry outposts, making everything from these tiles to brick to architectural terracotta.
We're famous for brick, right?
Yes.
Let's look at the next one.
Sure. And a real big anchor, one of the great opportunities of this exhibit, to take our collection and engage the Pulitzer building. So actually look at cues from the Pulitzer. One of the great gestures will be installing some of the facade of this building, the Rivoli, which is actually plaster. This is all incised colored plaster called sgraffito, a very rare building material. And we'll be laying out panels in the large cube gallery on the upper level so that people can really get a sense of the size and scale of this building, which disappeared from downtown St. Louis in 1986 for a parking lot.
How was this stuff saved? Because you would think, and tell me if I'm wrong, at the time these buildings were torn down, was anyone thinking, oh, we should preserve some of this? I would think you're lucky to have anything.
Well, yes, and I think we have an image up ahead showing the deconstruction process in the Rivoli. But architectural salvage actually has a long history back to the ancient era where in Roman times, emperors would take, pillage parts of panels and elements of monuments of their predecessors and add them to their own monuments as if, they were always the emperor. That's called spolia. But in American history, it's really in the 20th century that, especially with urban renewal in the 1930s and 40s, and especially right after World War II, where large parts of cities are coming down, that people start figuring out, how do we take these buildings apart and save some away? And our founder, Larry Giles, basically, he said he studied the way buildings were built and did everything in reverse. And in some cases needed almost the same tools to do it.
Stephanie, I wonder if people in your position are a little more aware now, and if a building comes down now, maybe they're thinking more of we need to document some of it.
I would say maybe less in my position, though. Certainly people who are architectural historians or preservationists, I do think are very aware of calls to save materials and have their own motivations for wanting to save and study materials for public knowledge. Falls a little bit outside my expertise and maybe more into Michael's area.
Okay. Let's look at some more images. This is the Urban Archaeology Lost Buildings of St. Louis, which opens at the Pulitzer in September.
Right. And here's an example of this photograph will be on display in the room with the Rivoli. So each set of artifacts will have, an array of images and even some primary source documents, like letters of people urging preservation with their, original signature. So you won't just see these panels that we just looked at from the Rivoli on a wall, and it'll be some cryptic message for insiders to understand and everyone else to scratch their head over. We'll actually show you what the building looked like during deconstruction at the moment of demolition, but also historic images were available.
Let's go to the next one.
And so here's the answer to your earlier question with taking it apart. Hoist and sling, gravity and tooling It's really, again, literally the same thing in reverse, but it takes a lot of care not to damage a plaster panel like this. So, and again, a lot of people think Larry must have been an engineer, an architect, a builder. He was a Vietnam vet who just wanted to do something good for the world. He thought, we're losing the treasures of St. Louis. And eventually he went on to work in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, became a consultant to the New York Landmarks Commission, was one of the only people in the country who had really taught himself how to do this.
Let's look at the next one.
And I think one of the things that this exhibition brings up, and Michael can talk about this in relationship to this image in a moment, is just when we do have the objects that remain, how much of their original context are we able to understand? So when a fragment is saved and put into the collection at NBAC and brought to the Pulitzer, what knowledge can we gain from part of the whole, and what do we miss? And I'm not sure, if Michael, if you want to talk about that in relationship to downtown and the different visions that downtown has undertaken over the many years.
Yeah, there's a large theme in the one gallery with Grand Center, Midtown, and downtown. Artifacts that have come from buildings that have been demolished, some of which have been heated preservation battles as preservationists got a little more active. But we're also looking at these neighborhoods sort of expressing, cultural or economic power. Downtown still struggles with, it's supposed to be the heart of the region. It's also supposed to be some discernible image of St. Louis's economic wealth and power to the rest of the country, right? So we ask these neighborhoods to sometimes do the impossible.
When you say that, I wrote in my notes, so that it's echoing what you're saying. Somehow race, class, and power figures all into that.
Right.
How does it?
Well, in that last image, we saw downtown, a vision for downtown. And, one thing we want to avoid in the exhibition is simply mocking or dismissing the ideas that led to these demolitions. We want to understand what was the goal? What was the aspiration? I mean, that was a vision in the 1960s to modernize downtown that required a lot of demolition of buildings that I personally wouldn't demolish. But
Right.
we want to show where they think they're headed, right? Where are the power players and the building owners? They think they're building a new city. And the same forces that led this 1960s landscape to emerge actually led to the rise of the old buildings themselves, which replaced smaller buildings. The colonial buildings gave way to bigger 19th century buildings, gave way to skyscrapers, eventually giving way to modern buildings, parking lots, parks, and stadia.
And Stephanie, when Michael talks about that, since you're in Grand Center, it makes me think of Grand Center because I can't remember specifically, but there was a house or two there 5 or 6 years ago that was an ongoing controversy about there were people on both sides. So it's the same issue.
Yeah, there are controversies around so many historic buildings that have been removed, and it's certainly been no exception in Grand Center. Grand Center has a number of historic buildings that have been homes, theaters.
There was one right by
entertainment
Powell Symphony
venues.
Hall, right, that there was a controversy about.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes, the Culver House that was demolished when the plan for Powell Hall to expand was finalized. And there are examples from a number of venues, including one of the address stone from the Culver House and a number of buildings in Grand Center in the exhibition. And we actually look also at the Pulitzer's own history and the story of the Beaumont Medical Building, which is the former structure that stood on the lot that the Pulitzer currently occupies and was demolished quite a time before the Pulitzer was constructed. But everywhere you look in the city, including in Grand Center, there are layers of history that date back even before modern architecture to the origins of the built environment in the city as a mound city.
Let's look at a few more images. We've just got a few minutes left.
And so this is a lion pendant medallion that was in the Buder building, one of the buildings torn down to build the Gateway Mall park system in downtown in the 1980s. And so believe it or not, that green orb was the first colored piece of terracotta, colored glazed piece of terracotta in U.S. history.
Really?
As modest as it looks. So here we have an object, this is, I think, the kind of work we're trying to do that simultaneously speaks to craft and techniques, but also, the reason it's laying here on this card is the power play of the mayors and the developers downtown, right? So
Let's go to the next one.
And this is a panel from the West End Hotel, a building demolished on the edge of Grand Center in the 1960s. Again, remarkable Bedford limestone craft. This is the marriage of the Industrial Revolution and the hand. This would have been hand carved, but with a pneumatic powered chisel. So, you know, we have the machine and the human. This building also became an African American hotel, one of the most luxurious in the country, and had a major venue called the West End Waiters Club where Billie Holiday once sang. So it's this 19th century, it's this restricted white, you know, affluent hotel, but by the middle of the 20th century, it's one of the nerve centers of Black culture in the city.
I'm wondering, part of the reason, I don't know if this is right, and I'm just thinking, that when buildings like this are torn down, is it because of what looks really beautiful to us now seems outdated to them, you know, 40 years ago, that they don't realize that something old is something neat?
Right.
Is that kind of right?
That's true. I mean, this building was on the edge of Vandeventer Place, this private street where the Cochrane Medical Center stands now. And believe it or not, there was a time when people thought the Cochrane Medical Center was much more representative of the progress St. Louis wanted than a row of 19th century Gilded Age mansions designed by famous architects.
I think we've got time to look at one more.
One thing, by the way, to add, and I think this image illustrates this well, about the point you were just making, is that the exhibition actually looks at the many different reasons why people seek to preserve or to remove buildings. So it addresses, to some extent, the instances in which you were just speaking about when there are changing tastes and visions for the city and ideas about modernism, but also instances in which neighbors might decide that the removal of a building is to their benefit, or a building like the one here, the Clemens House, which Michael can speak to, which garners all kinds of different reactions from different groups of people.
I think we're just about out of time.
sorry.
I could talk to you much longer about this. I want to remind everyone that it's Urban Archaeology, The Lost Buildings of St. Louis. It opens on September the 8th at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation on Washington Boulevard and runs till February 4th of 24. And you do tours and things too, don't you?
Yes, we do. We'll have a curatorial tour the opening weekend, and we do exhibition tours regularly.
And in just a few seconds, what would a person learn from coming to this exhibition, real quickly?
Well, I think they would learn that the built environment, you know, is a collection of pieces that have both sort of a physical presence that is often overlooked, but also social, political, and economic records that few people would think when they're looking at a brick.
I have to stop you there. But
Right.
I think you've raised our curiosity level. Thank you both, Michael and Stephanie, for being here. And be sure and go to the Pulitzer website and you can find out more about it and go see it. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
I'm Steve Potter, and thank you for watching City Corner. Join us next time. Bye.